The sun was just beginning to rise over the rugged mountains, casting a warm orange glow across the rocky slopes. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and the wind whispered through the tall pine trees. Somewhere in the valley below, a small village was waking up. The smell of fresh bread and cooking fires drifted through the air, but in the quiet woods nearby, a different story was unfolding. Amara had always been cautious. She had grown up in this village, learning to respect the mountains, to watch the animals, and to trust only a few people. But this morning, her careful life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. She moved quietly along the narrow path that wound up through the forest, her hands gripping the worn straps of her bag. Each step she took was measured, each breath controlled. Her mind was full of worry because something bad had happened yesterday, something she could not easily forget. Yesterday, she had been walking through the woods like any other day when a group of strangers appeared out of nowhere. They weren't from the village, their eyes were cruel, and their laughter sounded like broken glass. Without warning, they surrounded her. They pushed her to the ground, and she could feel the sharp sting as they grabbed her arms. Fear rose in her chest, cold and heavy. She tried to scream, but it was useless. Their strength was overwhelming, and their enjoyment of her pain was horrifying. They were laughing as they hurt her, and she could not understand why anyone would find joy in such cruelty. Her bones ached now, the memory of the attack fresh and raw in her mind. She pressed a hand to her side, feeling the dull, lingering pain where they had been roughest with her. The village healer had done what she could, but there was only so much that words and salves could heal. Deep down, Amara knew that she could not stay in the village. Not yet. Not while those people still roamed the mountains, laughing at the suffering they caused. She had to do something, even if she didn't yet know what. As she climbed higher along the rocky path, she remembered a story her grandfather had told her when she was a child. It was a story of a man who lived alone in the mountains, a giant of a man who could move rocks and bend trees with his bare hands. They called him the Mountain Man. People said he was terrifying, but he had a sense of justice that no one could ignore. He helped those who were wronged, but woe to anyone who crossed him. Amara had never seen him, of course, and she had thought the story was just a tale to keep children in line. But now, as she thought of her attackers, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps the stories were true. Perhaps the mountain man could help her. The climb grew steeper. Her legs ached with each step, and her arms shook from the effort of holding herself steady on the loose rocks. She stumbled once or twice, catching herself against the rough bark of a tree. But she did not stop. Her resolve had become something physical, something that pushed her forward no matter how tired or frightened she felt. Each breath was hard, each movement deliberate, but she could feel determination growing in her chest. She would not let fear control her. Not today. Finally, after hours of climbing, she reached a clearing near the top of the mountain. The view took her breath away. From here, she could see the entire valley. The village like a tiny cluster of dots, the river winding through the trees like a silver ribbon. And there, standing near a massive boulder, was the Mountain Man. He was enormous, easily twice the size of any man she had ever seen. His arms were thick as tree trunks, and his hair was long and wild, falling past his shoulders like a dark waterfall. His eyes, however, were what struck her most. They were sharp and piercing, but not unkind. They seemed to look right through her, as though he could see the very essence of her pain and determination. Amara hesitated for a moment. Fear made her pause. What if he was not kind, as the stories said? What if he was as cruel as the people who had hurt her? But then she thought of the attack, of the laughter that still echoed in her ears, and she stepped forward. "Please," she called, her voice shaking but loud enough to carry. "I need your help." The Mountain Man turned slowly toward her. His gaze fell on her, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he spoke, his voice low and rumbling, like distant thunder. "They broke your bones for fun," he said, almost as if repeating her own thoughts. "Then I will break them twice as slow." Amara felt a chill run down her spine. His words were not a threat, exactly, but they carried a weight she could barely comprehend. She realized then that he understood what had happened. He understood the pain, the fear, and the need for justice. And somehow, she knew he would act, not with anger or mindless violence, but with patience and strength that could not be rushed. He gestured for her to follow him. She did, stepping carefully over roots and rocks. The clearing ended at the edge of a cave, its mouth dark and wide. Inside, the air was cool and damp, smelling faintly of earth and stone. He led her further in, deeper into the shadows, until the outside world seemed a distant memory. Here, in the quiet of the cave, the mountain man began to teach her, not just lessons of survival, but lessons of strength, of understanding fear, and of controlling it. He showed her how to move silently, how to read the signs of the mountains, how to trust her instincts. Days passed, or maybe weeks, it was hard to tell. Time seemed different in the cave. Amara's muscles grew stronger, her reflexes quicker. But more importantly, her mind grew sharper. She began to understand the balance of the mountains, the rhythm of the wind, and the subtle signs that foretold danger. And slowly, she felt fear giving way to something else, resolve, not revenge exactly, but justice. She knew that when the time came, she would not be the same frightened girl who had fled the village. She would be ready. The mountain man watched her progress carefully, never pushing too hard, never rushing her. Patience, he would say. Strength without patience is like a river that runs dry before reaching the sea. She repeated his words to herself often, finding comfort in them when exhaustion and doubt crept in, and she began to see a change in herself. Her anger no longer felt like a burden. It became a tool, a quiet force that guided her every move. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple, the mountain man finally spoke in a serious tone. "They will come again," he said. "They always do. But when they do, you will not be afraid. You will act, slowly, carefully, and they will see that cruelty has a price." Amara nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle into her bones. She realized then that her journey was not just about her own pain. It was about learning, growing, and understanding the power of patience and strength. It was about preparing to face those who had hurt her. Not recklessly, but with the skill and calm that only time and careful guidance could provide. As darkness fell over the mountains, the cave became a sanctuary. The wind outside howled through the trees, and the village below grew quiet. Inside, Amara felt a sense of peace she had never known. She was still scared, still carrying the memory of yesterday's pain, but she also felt a spark of hope. She had found an ally in the mountain man, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, in the shadow of the towering peaks, Amara began to prepare for the path that would lead her back to the world above, stronger and wiser than she had ever been. She did not yet know when the moment would come to confront those who had harmed her, but she understood one thing clearly. When it did, she would be ready. And the mountain man's words echoed in her mind, a promise and a warning both. "They broke your bones for fun. Then I will break them twice as slow." With that, the first chapter of her new life ended, not with fear or despair, but with determination. The mountains stretched endlessly before her, full of secrets, dangers, and opportunities. And for the first time, she felt that she could meet them all head-on. Amara woke early that morning, before the first rays of sunlight had touched the peaks. The cave was quiet, filled only with the soft sound of dripping water and the faint rustle of small animals outside. She stretched her sore muscles, feeling the familiar ache from yesterday's training, and took a deep breath. Every day in the mountains tested her body and her mind, and every day she felt herself growing stronger, more capable, more aware. The mountain man was already awake. He sat near the entrance of the cave, a fire burning in a small stone circle in front of him. The smoke curled upward, twisting in the dim morning light. He looked at her as she approached, his eyes steady and knowing. "Good," he said, his deep voice filling the space. You rise with the mountains. That is the first step. Amara nodded. She had begun to understand that every lesson here was more than just physical. It was about discipline, observation, and patience. Her training was rigorous, often pushing her to her limits. But the mountain man never allowed her to quit. Every time she stumbled, every time her arms shook from lifting rocks or climbing steep cliffs, he would simply say, "Try again." Slowly, carefully. And slowly, she learned that strength was not just about muscles, but about endurance and determination. That day, he led her to a part of the mountain she had never seen before. It was a narrow ridge that jutted sharply from the main peak, its edges sharp and unforgiving. Below, the valley stretched far and wide, a patchwork of forests, rivers, and tiny village homes. Today, the mountain man said, you will learn to see without being seen. Amara frowned. She did not fully understand. See without being seen? She asked. Yes, he replied. There are people who watch. There are dangers that come when you least expect them. You must move like the wind, quiet and unnoticed. Only then will you have the power to act when it matters most. The lesson was not easy. She spent hours crawling over jagged rocks, learning to balance without slipping, to hold her breath when necessary, to move her feet silently over gravel and loose stones. Sometimes she fell, scraping her knees and hands, but the mountain man never offered comfort. Instead, he encouraged her to get up, to adjust her movements, to notice every small detail in the rocks and trees around her. Slowly, she began to feel the rhythm of the mountain. The rocks became familiar beneath her fingers, the wind's direction became a signal, and even the smallest bird's call became part of her awareness. As evening approached, the mountain man sat her down on a flat rock overlooking the valley. Look there, he said, pointing to the village below. Do you see the smoke from the baker's oven, the river where the children play? All of this is part of life, but all of this can also be danger if you do not understand it. You must know both. Amara watched closely, realizing that the valley had changed for her. She had seen it every day from a distance, but now she noticed details she had never seen before. The path that led to the forest, the faint footprints near the river, the movement of people in the fields, all of it told a story. And slowly, she began to understand that every action left a trace, every presence could be noticed if someone was watching. The mountain man continued. You must be patient. Patience is your greatest weapon. Fear may strike you. Anger may rise. But only patience gives you control. The words echoed in her mind as they hiked back to the cave. Night fell quickly, and the mountains became shadows and whispers. She learned to sleep lightly, listening to every sound, the distant howl of a wolf, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig. Sleep became a skill, as important as climbing or running. Days turned into weeks. Amara's training grew harder. The mountain man introduced her to new challenges, climbing sheer rock faces, balancing on thin ridges, lifting and moving large stones to test her strength. He taught her to make traps and defensive tools using only what nature provided, showing her that creativity and patience could be just as powerful as physical strength. During one particularly difficult exercise, Amara had to cross a narrow ledge with a sheer drop on one side. Her legs trembled, her heart pounded, and the wind threatened to throw her off balance. She froze, thinking of the pain she had felt when she was attacked, the fear she wanted to leave behind. The mountain man did not speak. He simply watched, and then she remembered his words. Slowly, carefully, one step at a time, she moved. She placed her feet with precision, her hands brushing the rock for balance. The wind howled, but she did not panic. With every careful movement, her confidence grew. By the time she reached the other side, she was breathing heavily, but there was a smile on her face. She had done it. She had faced fear directly and survived. And in that moment, she felt a shift inside herself. an understanding that courage was not the absence of fear, but the control of it. The mountain man nodded approvingly. Today, you faced fear. Tomorrow, you will face more. And one day, you will face those who hurt you. When that time comes, you will not rush. You will act with precision. That night, Amara dreamed of the attack. She saw the cruel faces of the people who had hurt her, heard their laughter echoing in her ears. But the dream was different this time. She did not feel powerless. She saw herself standing tall, moving with strength and skill, confronting them calmly and deliberately. She woke with a sense of purpose she had never known before. Over the following days, the mountain man shifted their lessons to focus on strategy and awareness. He taught her to observe patterns, how people moved, how the seasons affected the mountains, how to predict actions based on small details. He showed her that knowledge was as important as strength, that understanding her environment and her opponents would give her an advantage far greater than brute force alone. Amara absorbed every lesson. She practiced climbing at dawn, tracking at dusk, and observing from high ridges at midday. Each day, she grew stronger, faster, more capable. And yet, the mountain man never let her forget patience. Strength without patience is dangerous, he would say. You may act, but only when the time is right. Never before. One afternoon, as they rested by a clear mountain stream, Amara spoke up. "When will I be ready?" she asked. "When will I be able to face them?" The mountain man did not answer immediately. He threw a small stone into the water, watching the ripples spread. "Readiness is not a date," he said finally. "It is a feeling. You will know when it is time because fear will still be there. But it will no longer control you. Patience and preparation will guide your actions, and then you will act." Amara thought about that for a long time. She realized that readiness was not about waiting for the perfect moment, it was about becoming strong and disciplined enough to create the perfect moment. And she understood that the journey itself was just as important as the destination. Each lesson, each struggle, each small victory built her confidence and skill, shaping her into someone capable of facing even the cruelest opponents. By the time the sun began to set behind the peaks, casting long shadows across the valley, Amara felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She was not the same girl who had fled through the forest in fear weeks ago. She was stronger, wiser, and more aware. And though the memory of the attack still lingered, it no longer held her captive. It had become fuel, a reason to continue, to grow, and to prepare for the day she would reclaim her life and stand up to those who had hurt her. The mountain man watched her silently, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. "Soon, you will leave the mountains," he said, "not as a frightened girl, but as someone who can face the world with skill and patience. Remember what you have learned here: strength, observation, patience, and always, control." Amara nodded. She did not yet know when that day would come, but she felt ready in a way she had never felt before. The mountains had become her teacher, the mountain man her guide, and she had learned lessons that would last a lifetime. And as night fell and the stars appeared, bright and countless above the peaks, she felt a spark of hope ignite within her. The world below was still dangerous, still full of people who could cause harm. But she had changed. She was no longer powerless. And when the moment came to confront those who had hurt her, she would act not recklessly, not in anger, but with the precision, patience, and strength that only months of preparation could provide. And so, as the fire crackled and the wind sang through the mountains, Amara felt herself standing on the edge of a new chapter in her life. The journey had been difficult, the lessons hard, but she was ready. The mountain man had kept his promise, guiding her, shaping her, teaching her the way of patience and strength. And now, she waited for the moment when she could step back into the world and face her fears with courage, calm, and determination. Amara woke to the crisp morning air, the sunlight filtering softly through the entrance of the cave. The mountains seemed alive with sound. The whisper of the wind through the pines, the distant calls of birds, and the occasional rustle of animals moving unseen through the underbrush. She had learned to notice these sounds, to read them as signals, each carrying meaning. Over the weeks, she had grown sharper, stronger, and more confident in her abilities. Yet, a new feeling stirred within her, a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She knew the time was drawing near when she would have to return to the village. The mountain man was already awake, sharpening a long wooden staff with precise, practiced movements. The sound of the scraping wood against the stone echoed faintly in the cave. He looked up at her and gave a nod. "You are ready to see the world again," he said, his deep voice calm but firm. "The mountains have taught you patience, strength, and awareness. Now it is time to apply these lessons." Amara took a deep breath. She felt a flutter of fear in her chest. But it was different from before. This fear was not paralyzing. It was sharp, focused, and purposeful. She had learned that fear could be an ally if used wisely, a signal to stay alert and act carefully. She tightened the straps of her bag, checking the tools and supplies she had prepared during her training, and followed the mountain man out of the cave. The journey down the mountain was slower than she remembered. Every step required care. Loose stones, uneven ground, and hidden roots could cause injury if ignored. She moved silently, her senses heightened, listening to the rhythm of the world around her. The mountain man walked beside her, occasionally pointing out small details she might have missed. The faint tracks of a deer, the disturbed soil where a rabbit had burrowed, the subtle shift in the wind direction. These lessons were simple yet profound, teaching her to respect her environment and anticipate what might come. By midday, they reached a small plateau overlooking the village. From here, the houses looked tiny, and the villagers seemed unaware of the world above them. Amara's heart tightened as she thought of what had happened weeks ago. The cruel strangers who had attacked her were likely still nearby, hiding among the shadows of the forests or walking freely through the valley. But instead of panic, she felt a calm determination. She had grown, learned, and prepared. And now, she would not run. The mountain man crouched beside her, lowering his voice. "Today, you will observe," he said. "You will not act rashly. Watch. Learn. Patience first. Action later." Amara nodded. She watched the village carefully, noting the paths people took, the routines they followed, and the way the sunlight fell across streets and roofs. She realized that understanding the rhythm of the village was just as important as mastering the mountains. She could predict when someone would leave their house, when the markets would be busy, and when the shadows would hide movement. Knowledge, she understood now, was as powerful as any weapon. As the sun began to sink behind the distant hills, Amara spotted movement near the edge of the forest. A small group of figures was walking quickly, scanning the area as if looking for something or someone. Her stomach tightened. She recognized the way they moved, the cruel laughter that echoed faintly through the trees. Her attackers, the people who had hurt her. For a moment, her heart raced. The fear she had carried for so long returned, but it was tempered by the lessons of the mountain man. She focused on her breathing, controlling the urge to panic. She remembered his words. Patience. Strength without patience is useless. Wait for the right moment. Town. She crouched lower, using the shadow of a rock to conceal herself. Her hands were steady, her senses alert. She watched as the group moved closer to the village, unaware that she was observing them. She noticed small details, the way one of them carried a stick with cruel intention, the way another glanced nervously at the surroundings, perhaps sensing that someone might be watching. Every detail added to her understanding of their behavior. The mountain man's voice was quiet but firm beside her. You see them. You understand them. Now remember, you are not here to fight yet. You are here to prepare. Knowledge gives you power. Amara nodded again, feeling a rush of clarity. She realized that the moment for confrontation would come, but it must be carefully planned. Acting in anger would only make her vulnerable. She had to be precise, deliberate, and controlled. She spent the rest of the day observing, noting their routines, learning their weaknesses, and understanding how they thought. Night fell, and the attackers finally retreated into the forest, leaving the village peaceful once more. Amara and the mountain man returned to their temporary camp, a small clearing hidden among the trees. As she rested, her mind replayed the day's observations. She sketched mental maps of the village, noting safe paths, hidden vantage points, and escape routes. She considered every possible scenario, every movement the attackers might make, and how she could respond. The mountain man studied her quietly before speaking. "You have learned well," he said. "Strength alone does not win battles. Knowledge and patience do. You are ready to return to the village when the time comes, but remember, you must not rush. Let the moment present itself, and then you will act." Amara listened carefully, absorbing his words. She realized that her preparation was not just physical, but mental and emotional as well. She was learning to anticipate fear, to control her reactions, and to act with purpose rather than impulse. The mountain man's lessons were no longer about climbing rocks or lifting stones. They were about understanding herself and the world around her. The following days passed in a careful routine. Amara would wake before dawn, practice climbing and tracking, and spend hours observing the village from hidden vantage points. She learned to move silently through the forests, to disappear into shadows, and to use the natural landscape to her advantage. Each day, she became more confident in her abilities, more aware of her surroundings, and more certain of her control over fear. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the valley, Amara saw the attackers return. This time, they were bolder, moving closer to the village with less caution. Her pulse quickened, but she remained calm. She observed them carefully, noting their exact path, their stops, and their interactions. She saw small cracks in their behavior: hesitation, overconfidence, and distraction. These were weaknesses she could use. The mountain man stood beside her, silent but alert. "You understand them now," he said. "Do not act yet. Wait. Let them reveal themselves fully. Then you will have the advantage." Hours passed. The attackers grew careless, their laughter louder, their movements predictable. Amara's mind worked like a map, tracing their steps, imagining the paths she could take, the tools she could use, and the ways she could confront them. Every decision was weighed carefully, every possibility considered. She understood now that true strength was not in the first strike but in the timing of the right strike. As darkness fell, Amara prepared herself for what would come. She checked her tools, adjusted her clothing to blend with the shadows, and positioned herself in a concealed spot overlooking the path the attackers would take. Her heart beat steadily, her breath controlled, her mind focused. Fear was present, but it was no longer a chain around her chest. It was energy, sharpened and directed. The attackers moved into the path below, unaware of her presence. Amara watched, noting every detail, every movement. She could see the exact moment when they would be most vulnerable, the point at which she could act with precision and control. She recalled the mountain man's words: "Patience. Strength without patience is useless." She waited, calm and still, knowing that the moment of action was near. Suddenly, a small sound betrayed her presence. A twig snapped beneath her foot. The attackers froze, scanning the area nervously. Amara's heart skipped a beat, but she remained motionless, blending into the shadows. After a tense moment, the attackers moved on, unaware of how close they had come to discovery. She exhaled slowly, relief mingled with renewed focus. Every detail mattered. Every moment counted. That night, as she returned to the camp with the mountain man, Amara felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The confrontation was near, but she understood now that rushing would only lead to mistakes. She had learned the art of patience, the power of observation, and the importance of preparation, and she knew, deep in her heart, that when the time came, she would be ready to face her attackers not with mindless anger, but with calculated strength, precision, and calm. The mountain man spoke one last time before she slept. Tomorrow, you will return to the village. You will see them clearly, understand them fully, and be ready. Remember all that you have learned. Fear is not your enemy. Control of fear is. Patience is not weakness, it is power. And when the time comes, act with the precision and strength you have earned. Amara lay beneath the stars, the cool mountain air brushing her face. She thought of the village below, the people who had hurt her, and the months of preparation she had endured. She no longer felt helpless or afraid. She felt ready, strong, and aware. And for the first time, she knew that she could confront her past with courage, skill, and patience. The mountains had shaped her. The mountain man had guided her. And her own determination had carried her this far. Tomorrow, the next chapter of her life, would begin. The moment of confrontation was near, and she would meet it not as a frightened girl, but as someone who had learned the true meaning of strength, patience, and control. And as she closed her eyes, letting the gentle sound of the night wash over her, Amara felt a quiet sense of power and anticipation. The time to act was coming. The world below would see that she was no longer a victim. She was ready. The first light of dawn broke over the valley, painting the village in soft gold and pink. Amara sat quietly on the ridge, hidden among the rocks and trees, watching the village below. Today was the day. The mountain man had prepared her for this moment for months, teaching her patience, control, and observation. Every step she had taken, every lesson she had learned, had led to this. Her heart beat steadily, her mind clear and focused. She was ready. The attackers were already moving through the village outskirts. Amara had spent the night mapping their likely path, predicting their movements, and preparing her approach. She observed them carefully, noting their careless posture, the way they laughed without caution, and the overconfidence that came from thinking no one was watching. Every detail mattered, and she memorized it all, storing it in her mind like pieces of a puzzle. The mountain man's words echoed in her head. Patience is power. Fear is not your enemy. Control is your strength. She had learned to see fear not as a chain, but as a signal to focus. Her hands no longer shook at the thought of facing them. Her mind was sharp, her senses alert, and her body ready to move with precision. As the attackers moved closer to the village center, Amara began her descent. She took the path she had planned carefully, stepping silently over rocks and through shadows, blending with the early morning mist. Her muscles had grown strong from months of climbing and training, and her balance was perfect. Every step was deliberate, every movement controlled. She was like a shadow, unseen, unheard, and completely prepared. When she reached a safe vantage point overlooking the attackers, she paused to observe once more. She noticed their weaknesses clearly. The hesitation of one who constantly glanced around nervously. The overconfidence of another who led the group without caution, the way their attention was divided among themselves rather than on their surroundings. Amara smiled faintly. Knowledge, patience, and observation, these were her tools, and she wielded them like a weapon far sharper than any stick or stone. Finally, she saw the moment she had been waiting for. The attackers stopped near the village square, distracted by something in the crowd. It was brief, just a few seconds, but it was enough. Amara moved silently from her hiding place, using the shadows and walls as cover. Her heart did not race. Her mind did not waver. Every step had been prepared, every action thought through. When she reached the perfect position, she stopped, crouched, and waited. The first attacker moved carelessly, unaware of her presence. Amara acted with the precision and patience she had learned. She did not strike recklessly. Instead, she used her knowledge of the terrain to create an obstacle, causing him to stumble without harming him seriously. The sudden movement drew the attention of the others. They turned, surprised, their overconfidence shattered by the unexpected. Amara did not attack blindly. She remembered the mountain man's teachings, to control, to observe, to act when the moment was right. She moved strategically, positioning herself so that each attacker's movements were limited, forcing them into paths she could control. Her mind worked quickly, predicting their reactions, planning her next steps. They tried to regroup, but every action they took played into the careful strategy she had prepared. The attacker's laughter was gone. Fear and confusion replaced it as they realized they were not in control. Amara's calm presence, her quiet strength, and her careful movements unnerved them. She did not shout. She did not show anger. She moved with purpose, and every motion carried the weight of months of preparation. One of the attackers lunged toward her, thinking to surprise her. She sidestepped smoothly, using his momentum to guide him harmlessly into a wall. Another tried to flank her, but she anticipated the move, redirecting him with a well-timed nudge and a shift in her position. None of her actions were violent beyond what was necessary to defend herself and neutralize their threat. Every move was precise, every decision controlled. The village people began to notice the commotion, gathering at a safe distance. Some gasped in surprise, others froze in fear. But none interfered. They could see the difference immediately. Amara was no longer the frightened girl who had once fled through the forest. She was strong, controlled, and unshakable. She had become someone capable of facing danger with clarity and skill. The attackers, now fully aware of her presence and their disadvantage, tried to retreat. But Amara had anticipated this. She moved methodically, cutting off their paths, guiding them into corners where they could not escape easily. They realized, too late, that they were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted, caught in a web of strategy, patience, and quiet strength. Finally, the lead attacker, the one who had been the cruelest, paused, his eyes wide with fear. Amara stepped forward slowly, deliberately, maintaining control of herself. She did not strike in anger, did not shout or threaten. Her presence alone was enough to show them that their actions had consequences. She spoke quietly but firmly. "You harmed me for fun. Now you will see that cruelty has a price." The attackers understood, in that moment, that they were powerless against someone who had prepared, observed, and acted with patience and strength. They were not beaten through violence alone, but through the skill, courage, and calculated control of someone they had underestimated. Amara's movements remained calm, deliberate, showing no haste. She guided them out of the village, ensuring that they could not harm anyone else. Her actions were controlled, precise, and effective. Each step was a lesson in strategy, patience, and the careful use of strength. By the time they were completely neutralized, they were shaken, exhausted, and humbled. They had learned a truth they would never forget, that cruelty could be met with careful, deliberate consequences. When the danger had passed, Amara stood alone in the quiet village square. Her muscles ached, her breath was steady, and her heart was calm. The villagers, now realizing what had occurred, approached her slowly, awe and respect in their eyes. They saw not only the girl they had known but someone transformed, strong, controlled, and courageous. The mountain man appeared silently behind her, his presence steady and reassuring. "You have done well," he said. "Strength, patience, and observation won the day. Remember this: control is power. Anger without control is weakness." Amara nodded, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced her fears, confronted those who had hurt her, and acted with skill and precision. She had learned to use fear as a tool, patience as a weapon, and knowledge as armor. She had not sought revenge in anger, but justice through preparation and control. The villagers gathered around her, offering quiet thanks and support. Some embraced her, others simply nodded, understanding the journey she had undertaken and the strength she had shown. Amara felt a sense of belonging she had never felt before. She had faced her past, proven her strength, and earned the respect of those around her. The mountain man placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of approval and pride. "The mountains have taught you well," he said. But remember, strength without wisdom is dangerous. You have learned both. Now go forward with courage and control." Amara looked out over the village, the mountains in the distance, and the clear sky above. She realized that she was no longer the frightened girl who had fled into the forest. She was someone transformed strong, wise, patient, and in control. She had faced danger, learned from it, and emerged victorious. Not through brute force, but through careful preparation, observation, and determination. In the days that followed, Amara continued to live in the village, but she was no longer defined by fear or past cruelty. She taught others what she had learned: the value of patience, the power of observation, and the importance of controlling one's fear. She became a source of strength and guidance for the villagers, showing that true power came not from anger, but from careful preparation, calm action, and inner strength. The memory of the attack never left her entirely, but it no longer controlled her. It had become a reminder of what she had endured and overcome, a testament to her growth and resilience. And every time she looked toward the mountains, she remembered the lessons of the mountain man: the patience, the discipline, and the quiet strength that had carried her through the darkest times. Amara had transformed fear into power, cruelty into a lesson, and pain into determination. She had faced the people who had tried to harm her, and had done so with skill, patience, and control. The village, once a place of fear for her, had become a place of strength, respect, and community. And as she walked through the streets, greeted by villagers who now looked up to her, Amara understood the true meaning of the mountain man's words. They broke your bones for fun. Now you see that strength, guided by patience, knowledge, and control, is far greater than any cruelty. Her journey had been long and difficult, filled with fear, pain, and uncertainty. But she had endured, learned, and transformed herself. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, a strategist, and a person of quiet but undeniable power. And as the sun set over the village, casting golden light across the rooftops and the valley, Amara knew that she was ready for whatever life would bring next. The mountains had shaped her. The mountain man had guided her. And she had become someone who could face any challenge, act with precision, and move forward with courage, wisdom, and control. Her story, once one of fear and pain, had become a story of strength, patience, and triumph, a story that would be remembered in the village for years to come. And in the quiet of the evening, as the wind whispered through the trees and the stars began to shine above, Amara smiled, knowing that she had not only survived, but had become stronger, wiser, and unbreakable in spirit.